The air in Glenwood always smelled faintly of pine and smoke, like a memory that never quite left Maya. Brooks parked the ambulance near the diner that doubled as the town's shelter during fire season. It was 6:42 a.m., and the horizon was already bleeding orange. She checked her vitals kit, wiped the ash from her neck, and forced a tired smile. One more shift, she whispered, then maybe sleep. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee mingled with disinfectant. A few evacuees huddled near the counter, wrapped in blankets. Her daughter, Ellie, sat at one of the booths, drawing in a sketch pad, the sun rising behind a black line of trees. Maya leaned down and kissed her head. "Stay close to Mrs. Hanley, okay? I'll be back in an hour." Ellie looked up, big hazel eyes, serious. "Is the fire coming here, Mum?" "Not today," Maya said, though she wasn't sure. "The crews are keeping it away." Ellie nodded, then whispered, "I hate the smoke. It sounds like it's breathing." Maya's chest tightened. She wanted to say it wasn't alive, but in Colorado, fire had a soul of its own. The radio on her belt crackled. "Brooks, we've got a burn unit transfer, South Ridge. Coordinates 12 to 9 Delta." She sighed. "Copy that." The road up to South Ridge was lined with blackened trees, skeletal silhouettes against a sky the color of rust. As the ambulance climbed, the heat shimmered off the asphalt. When they reached the fire line, crews were everywhere, engines roaring, hoses hissing. Men in yellow suits, moving like ghosts through the haze. Maya jumped out, grabbed her med bag, and followed a paramedic waving her over. Victim stable, but was short-staffed. 3rd-degree burns, dehydration. "He's the captain, she repeated. The medic nodded toward a stretcher. Maya froze beneath the oxygen mask, beneath layers of soot and melted fabric. Those eyes, steel gray, unmistakable. Ethan Cole. Her chest felt hollow. She hadn't seen him in 5 years. Not since the fire that ended their marriage, the fire that killed 3 of his men. The fire she thought had taken him to. "Brooks," a medic barked. "We need vitals." She forced her hands to move, her mind splintering between duty and disbelief. "BP dropping," she murmured, pressing the monitor. "Get a line," in Ethan's eyelids fluttered. "Maya." Her name a ghost against the roar of flames. She swallowed hard. "Don't talk. You're burned." He tried to smile, the corners of his mouth trembling. "Still bossy, still stupid," she shot back, voice cracking. Hours later, when the fire crew secured the ridge, the ambulance raced back down the mountain with Ethan inside. His pulse was weak but steady. He'd survive. At the hospital, she helped wheel him into ICU. Another nurse took over, but Maya didn't leave. Couldn't she sat in the hallway long after shift change, staring at the burn ward door? How many nights had she dreamed of him walking back through one like it? She had moved on, or at least pretended to. She'd built a quiet life, raised Ellie, learned to stop checking the news every time a wildfire broke out. But now, the man she'd mourned for years was alive, and tomorrow morning, she'd have to look him in the eye and tell him he had a daughter. The next day dawned grey and wet, a rare rain after weeks of fire. Maya walked into ICU, heart pounding. Ethan was awake, pale against the sheets, but smiling faintly. "Didn't expect you to still be saving idiots like me." She folded her arms. "Didn't expect you to still be one." He laughed, a quiet, rasping sound that hit her like an old song. Then silence stretched between them, heavy, familiar. "I thought you were dead," she said finally. "I was, for a while," he replied. "Then I wasn't. They pulled me out of the canyon. Burned half my unit. I couldn't face." "Don't," she cut in. "Not now." He looked at her, eyes raw. "You're still wearing the necklace." She touched the small silver flame pendant on her chest. "A gift from him, long ago." "Some fires don't go out," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "You still talk like a poem, and you still think you're the hero." He nodded toward the window, where rain streaked the glass. "Heroes burn to Maya. We just don't always die." That night, as she drove home through the wet streets, Ellie slept in the back seat. The fire line glowed faintly in the distance, a pulse of orange behind the mountains. Maya's thoughts spun. He was back, alive, scarred, but still him. And tomorrow he'd learn the truth, that the little girl who drew pictures of fire and sky carried his eyes. Rain fell all night. It washed the smoke from the air, left the streets glistening like glass under the morning haze. For the first time in weeks, the mountains looked soft again, their jagged silhouettes wrapped in fog instead of fire. Maya parked outside Glenwood Rehabilitation Center, fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She'd promised herself she'd only check on Ethan once. Make sure he was stable. Make sure this wasn't some cruel trick. Then she'd walk away. She'd built a life without him. She wasn't about to let one man, one ghost, burn it down again. Inside, the rehab center smelled of antiseptic and rain-damp wood. The nurses greeted her with knowing smiles. In a town this small, news traveled faster than fire. "Captain Cole's been asking for you," one said softly. Maya forced a nod. "I'll only be a minute." He was by the window again, IV line in his arm, bandages running from wrist to shoulder. The bruises on his neck had faded to pale gold. He looked thinner, older, but alive, painfully, beautifully alive. He turned when she entered, eyes lighting up. "I thought I imagined you. Sorry to disappoint," she said, standing near the door. He chuckled quietly. "Disappointing was never your thing." "Don't start," she warned, but her voice trembled. They talked about safe things at first. The fire, the team, the new protocols, but every word felt like walking barefoot through ashes. "You could have called," he said finally. "I didn't know you were alive," she whispered. "And when I did, it was too late." He studied her face, the flicker of grief she tried to hide. "What did you tell people?" he asked. "That you died saving them," she said. "It was easier than saying you didn't come home." He nodded slowly. "And you came home without me." Her throat tightened. "Someone had to." Later that afternoon, Maya took Ellie to the park behind the rehab center, one of the few green places left untouched by the fire. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, but the grass was wet and cool under their feet. Ellie ran ahead, laughing, spinning in circles with her arms wide like a tiny hurricane. Maya watched her, heart full and heavy. How could she explain any of this? How could she tell a child that her father was both a hero and a ghost? Then, from across the field, Ethan appeared. He was walking slowly, leaning on a cane, a physical therapist hovering behind him. He stopped when he saw Ellie. His whole face softened. Maya froze, before she could stop it. Ellie ran toward him, small feet splashing through puddles. "Hey there," Ethan said, crouching as best he could, steadying himself with one hand on his knee. You okay, kiddo? Ellie looked up shyly. You're the fireman, he smiled. That's me. You draw the fire earlier. She blinked. How do you know? He tapped his temple. Firemen know everything about smoke. She giggled, then frowned suddenly. The shriek of a distant siren echoed through town. Instantly, her body stiffened. The crayon in her hand dropped. Maya's chest seized. Ellie, the girl, clutched her ears, trembling. Make it stop. Please, make it stop. Ethan reacted before anyone else. He knelt, pulling her gently into his arms. Hey, look at me, he said softly, his voice calm and warm, like water over stone. Breathe in with me, okay? Just like this. He inhaled deeply. Now let it go. Ellie mirrored him, tears streaking her cheeks. Slowly, the panic faded. He brushed her hair back. You're safe, little one, I promise. Maya stood a few feet away, frozen. Watching him comfort her daughter, their daughter, felt like watching the world crack open in slow motion. When the sirens faded, Ellie looked up at him again. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan smiled. Anytime, sunshine. Maya forced herself forward. Ellie, honey, come here. The girl ran into her arms. Maya kissed her forehead, whispering something incoherent. When she looked up, Ethan was watching them both. Confusion in his eyes, and something else, recognition. He didn't say a word. He just looked at Ellie, then at Maya, then back again. The way their eyes matched. The way she held her hand when she was scared. Pieces fell into place like embers finding old fuel. Who is she? He asked finally, voice hoarse. Maya hesitated, the world holding its breath. She's Ellie, she said softly. My daughter? His eyes didn't leave hers. Your daughter? Maya nodded slowly. Then, almost whispering, our daughter. The rain started again, soft and relentless. He said nothing for a long time, just looked at Ellie, then at the storm above them. Finally, he whispered, all this time. Maya closed her eyes. I wanted to tell you, but you were gone, Ethan, and when you came back, I didn't know how. He exhaled, shaking his head, not in anger, but in disbelief. I missed her first word, her first steps. Maya's voice broke. You missed everything. He looked at her then, eyes wet, jaw clenched. I won't miss anything else. That night, the rain never stopped. Maya sat on the porch steps, her knees pulled to her chest, watching the steady fall blur the lights of Glenwood into a watercolor of gold and grey. Ellie was asleep inside, curled up with her sketch pad, pages full of orange and blue crayon streaks that always looked like both fire and sky. Maya didn't hear the truck pull up until the headlights cut across her driveway. She knew it before she saw him. Ethan stepped out slowly, his jacket still damp, cane tapping against the wet ground. The cast on his wrist was smeared with soot. You shouldn't be out, she said quietly. You're supposed to rest. He gave a small, humorless smile. Yeah, you said that a lot back then too. Maya looked down at her hands. I said it because I didn't want to lose you. You lost me anyway, he said, voice low. She flinched. Rain whispered against the tin roof. He stepped closer, stopping at the edge of the porch light. She's mine, he said finally. Not a question, not a demand. Just truth. Maya swallowed hard. Yes. Ethan looked out at the rain, jaw tight. How old is she? 5. She'll be 6 in October. He nodded once. You named her Ellie. She hesitated. It was your mother's name. I thought his voice softened. It's beautiful. For a moment, the only sound was rain and breath. Then he asked the question she'd feared most. Why didn't you tell me? She looked up at him, eyes shining in the dim porch light. Because when they pulled your body out of that canyon, they told me you didn't make it. And after the funeral, after the headlines, after everyone stopped calling, there was no one left to tell. He shook his head slowly. You could have found me. I did, she said. I found a man who couldn't sleep, who drank until dawn, who blamed himself for every life he couldn't save. You burned Ethan, not just out there. In here, she touched her chest, just over her heart. You were gone long before the fire took you. He closed his eyes. The rain fell harder, cold and merciless. When he spoke again, his voice was almost a whisper. You thought I wouldn't want her. Maya's voice broke. I thought you couldn't handle losing one more thing. He stepped up onto the porch now, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of smoke still clinging to him. Do you think I don't want to handle it now? He asked. She looked away. I don't know what you want anymore. He exhaled, long and heavy. I want time. With her, with you, if that's still allowed. Maya let out a shaky laugh. You think you can just walk back into this after 5 years? He didn't move. You think I haven't been walking toward it every day since I came back? She met his eyes then, and for a second, the world seemed to stop. The rain, the wind, even her heartbeat. She could see everything there. Regret, hope, and the kind of love that never really dies. It just waits in the ashes. Inside, Ellie stirred in her sleep. Ethan glanced through the window. Does she know? Maya shook her head. Not yet. He nodded. Let me be the one to tell her. When the time's right. Her throat tightened. You think she'll forgive you for being gone? He looked at her, eyes wet. Do you? The question hung between them like smoke, heavy, bitter, and impossible to breathe through. Maya turned away, gripping the porch rail until her knuckles went white. You can't just show up and fix what burned. He stepped back, rain dripping from his hair. I'm not here to fix it. I'm here to stay. The next morning, the mountains were shrouded in mist. Ethan went back to the station for debriefing. Maya took Ellie to school, pretending her hands didn't shake when she packed her lunch, Dot everywhere she went. Whispers followed the firefighter who came back from the dead, the medic who raised his kid alone. In small towns, gossip spread faster than wildfire. At the grocery store, an old friend stopped her near the cereal aisle. He's back, huh? The captain? Heard he's living at the old firehouse. Maya forced a smile. Just until he's healed. The woman lowered her voice. Be careful, hun. The past burns twice. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She stepped outside, the sky clearing for the first time in days. Stars flickered faintly above the mountains. She walked to the back of the yard, where Ellie's tiny swing set sat half broken from years of wind. When she touched the seat, her hand came away black with soot, old ash, blown down from the ridge. She stared at it for a long moment, remembering the night of the fire, the radio static, the screaming, the world ending in orange. She'd thought she'd buried it all. Then a voice behind her. You still come out here when you can't sleep. She turned. Ethan stood by the fence, leaning on his cane, haloed in moonlight. Maya's eyes softened. And you still don't know how to stay gone. He smiled faintly. Guess some fires don't go out. She looked at him, eyes glistening. No, some just wait. By Thursday, the rain had stopped. The smell of wet earth lingered over Glenwood, but the town was restless. The fire had died out on the ridge, but another kind of heat had taken its place. Rumors, questions, the smell of blame. At the diner, two old men whispered over black coffee. Cole's back, shouldn't be. Not after what happened up at Slate Creek. 3 men dead. You think he just walks away from that? Maya heard every word as she picked up a to-go order for the clinic. She didn't turn around. She just paid, nodded, and left. But her hands shook all the way back to the truck. That afternoon, she got the call from Fire Command. Ms. Brooks. Captain Cole has requested you as a medical witness in his internal review. You were his on-site responder after the recent incident. She hesitated. You mean the fire last week? A pause. And the one 5 years ago. Her breath caught. He's being investigated again. Yes, ma'am. There are discrepancies in the old report. Missing logs, radio time. Someone reopened the file. She stared out at the rain-dark mountain range, the grey ridgeline where it all began. The past, it seemed, was burning again. When she reached the rehab center that evening, Ethan was sitting on the edge of his bed, reading a faded incident report. He looked up when she entered. You heard? Maya nodded. They're reopening the case. Yeah, he said quietly. They think I ignored the evac order, that I sent my crew back in when it was already too late. She crossed her arms. Did you? He looked at her, jaw tightening. You know me. That's not an answer. He threw the file aside, the papers scattering across the floor. I thought we could save them. One of them was just 22, first year on the line. He went back for a trapped family. I couldn't just leave him. Maya knelt, picking up the papers. You didn't tell command that they wouldn't have listened, he said. They wanted a clean report. No heroes. No mistakes. She stared at the crumpled file. And now they want a scapegoat. The next day, the hearing took place in the town hall, the same building that hosted every county fair and church fundraiser. Now it was filled with reporters, fire officials, and too many ghosts. Maya sat in the back, her palms slick with sweat. Ethan stood before the board, his uniform jacket buttoned to his throat, the burn scars faintly visible along his collar. Captain Cole, the investigator, began. The official record shows you violated evacuation protocol at 1942 hours. Can you confirm? I stayed because one of my men was still inside, Ethan said, and you didn't radio for backup. The line was down, according to cum logs. It was active until 1944. Ethan hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Maya, not pleading, not begging, just tired. The investigator pressed on. Were you aware that your decision cost 3 lives? The silence that followed was unbearable. Then Ethan said quietly, yes. Maya couldn't sit still. She left the hall before the hearing ended, the echo of Ethan's voice still burning in her ears. She found herself walking past the firehouse, past the park where Ellie played, all the way to the river. The air smelled of cold and pine sap. She sat on a rock, staring at the current, remembering the last time she'd seen Ethan like that, broken, guilty, carrying the weight of everyone he couldn't save. That was the night he'd come home and said nothing, just stared at the wall until dawn. And the next morning, he was gone, Now he was back, and somehow still lost in the same fire. When she returned home, Ellie was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring. "Mum," she said suddenly, "are you sad?" Maya forced a smile. "Just tired." Ellie looked at her with that tune-knowing gaze only children have. "Is it about the firemen?" Maya froze. "What do you mean?" Ellie bit her lip. "The kids at school said he's a hero and a bad guy. Which one is true?" Maya sat beside her, heart aching. "Sometimes people can be both, baby." Ellie frowned. "You love him, don't you?" Maya blinked. "Why would you say that?" Ellie shrugged. "Because when you talk about him, your voice sounds like when it rains." The next morning, Maya drove to the rehab center before sunrise. Ethan was on the balcony, watching the fog roll over the trees. He didn't turn when she stepped beside him. "They suspended me," he said. "Indefinitely." She took a slow breath. "What happens now?" "I don't know. Maybe I leave. Maybe I stay." Ellie asked if you're a hero or a bad guy. He laughed softly, bitterly. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth." He looked at her finally. "Which is?" "That you're both." Ethan nodded, eyes glistening. "Yeah, that's about right." They stood there in silence, side by side, as dawn broke the sky, turning from ash grey to pale gold. Maya whispered, "What if it happens again? What if you run toward the fire and don't come back?" He turned, meeting her gaze. "Then you tell her I did what I always do, which is..." He smiled faintly. "Try to save what's left." The fire started small, just a thin column of smoke twisting up from the north ridge. The sky was still pale, the air damp enough to fool everyone into thinking the danger had passed. By noon, it wasn't small anymore. Sirens wailed through Glenwood again. The sound that always made Ellie freeze that made Maya's stomach not dot at the clinic. Her phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Wildfire warning, North Ridge. Evacuation, in effect. She was halfway through packing trauma kits when she saw Ethan's name flash across her screen. "Ethan, they called the volunteers." "I'm heading out," she typed fast. "Maya, you're not cleared. You just got suspended." "Ethan, people are trapped. I can't sit here." She stared at the words until they blurred. Then she threw the phone into her bag and ran. When she reached the command site, the world was chaos again, wind whipping, smoke crawling down the slopes, trucks parked at every angle. She spotted him near the fire line, pulling on his helmet, limping slightly, but ignoring the medic yelling at him to stop. "Ethan," she shouted over the wind. He turned. For a second, through the haze, it was like seeing him 5 years ago, stubborn, eyes bright with that reckless light that scared her and made her love him all at once. "You shouldn't be here." She yelled. "Neither should you." He shot back. She took a step closer. "You're going to get yourself killed." He smiled grimly. "Then at least it'll make the news for something new." Before she could answer, the radio on his shoulder crackled. "Cole, we've got a flare-up near the old logging road." "You're closest?" He turned, expression hardening. "Copy that." And then he was gone into the smoke. Maya stayed behind, setting up triage near the trucks. She tried to keep busy, checking oxygen, wiping soot from burned hands, keeping her mind from imagining Ethan somewhere in that grey hell. But then one of the younger firefighters stumbled in, face streaked with ash. He went into the east ravine. The kid gasped. The line jumped. "We can't reach him." Her heart stopped. The same words. The same way 5 years ago. No, she whispered, grabbing a radio. Ethan, do you copy? Ethan, respond. Static. Ethan. Nothing. Hours passed. The fire finally eased when the wind turned, but no one had seen him come out. Maya refused to leave the site. She paced the perimeter until her lungs burned from smoke. When she finally sat, exhausted, the deputy chief approached her. They'll keep searching at first light, he said gently. We can't risk anyone else tonight. Her voice cracked. You're saying he's gone? He sighed. I'm saying it's a miracle anyone survived the ravine last time. Don't make me promise a second miracle. She turned away, tears cutting through the soot on her face. Back home, Ellie was waiting by the window. Where's the fireman? She asked softly. Maya swallowed hard. He's still working. Ellie frowned. He promised he'd draw stars with me when he came back. Maya knelt, brushing hair from her daughter's face. He will, baby. He keeps his promises. But inside, she wasn't sure she believed it. That night, unable to sleep, Maya opened the storage chest in her bedroom, the one she hadn't touched in years. Inside were Ethan's old station patches, a melted wristwatch, and a sealed envelope she'd found months after he'd vanished the first time. She'd never opened it. Her fingers trembled as she tore it now. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Maya, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. You told me once the worst thing a firefighter can do is run toward the wrong fire. I think I've been doing that all my life. If I die out there, don't let them say it was an accident. Nothing about that night was. She froze. Nothing about that night was an accident. She read it again, every word carving a deeper line into her chest the next morning. She drove to the old station, the one they'd closed after the Slate Creek fire. The building stood empty, dust floating in beams of light. She searched the office, the file cabinets, until she found the old radio logs. The timestamps matched the ones from the investigation, except there was a missing line. 1 minute deleted between 1942 and 1943, the minute when Ethan had supposedly ignored evacuation orders. She stared at the gap. Someone had cut it, and at the bottom of the file, a name she hadn't expected. Deputy Chief Ray Hanlon, her current supervisor. Her pulse spiked. Hanlon had been at both scenes. He was also the one who ordered Ethan's suspension. Outside, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. If you care about your little girl, stop looking into the past. The line went dead. Maya stood there, the empty firehouse echoing around her. For the first time, she felt truly afraid, not of fire, but of what had been hidden under its smoke. At dawn, a search helicopter spotted movement near the ravine. A single figure, limping, waving a flare through the fog. Ethan Cole was alive. When Ethan opened his eyes, the world was quiet again. White walls, the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, the faint scent of antiseptic and rain through an open window. He blinked, trying to focus on the blurred figure leaning over him. Maya, she looked like she hadn't slept in days, eyes shadowed, hair pulled into a messy bun, her hand resting over his. You're awake, she whispered. He managed a crooked smile. Barely. You're lucky, she said. They found you at the edge of the ravine. You could have. Her voice broke before she could finish. He squeezed her fingers weakly. It takes more than fire to kill me, remember? She smiled through tears. Don't say that. You've tested it enough times. A nurse entered, adjusting the fourth. You've got a few cracked ribs, mild smoke inhalation, and a concussion. No heroics for a while, Captain. Former Captain, he corrected, voice rough. The nurse gave him a look that said once a captain, always a captain, and left. Maya sat back, exhaling. You shouldn't have gone out there, she said. You were suspended. He closed his eyes. Someone had to help. There were 100 others. Not enough. Ethan. He turned to her, cutting her off. I heard something. What do you mean? On the radio. Before the explosion. A voice. She frowned. Whose voice? He looked at her steadily. Hours later, when he dozed off, Maya stepped outside into the hallway, her hands trembling. Deputy Chief Ray Hanlon. His name had been on the doctored report she'd found in the old station. And now Ethan remembered hearing his voice in the moment the world went up in flames. Coincidence? Or something much worse? She pulled her phone from her pocket, scrolling through contacts, then hesitated. Who could she even trust now? Before she could decide, her screen lit up with a new text from an unknown number. Stop digging, Maya. Fires have a way of spreading. Her stomach dropped. She deleted the message instantly, but her reflection in the dark hospital glass looked pale, haunted that someone was watching. The next morning, the hospital cafeteria buzzed with quiet gossip. She caught whispers about the fire, about Ethan's heroism, about how these things just keep happening when Cole's around. She ignored them, carrying 2 coffees back to Ethan's room. When she pushed the door open, she froze. Deputy Chief Hanlon was already there. He stood by the bed, grey uniform spotless, a rehearsed concern on his face. Good to see you alive, son, he said. Ethan's voice was thin but steady. Didn't expect you to care. Hanlon chuckled. I always care about my men. Then why'd you cut the evacuation feed? Ethan asked. Maya's breath caught. Hanlon's smile never faltered. You're confused, Captain. Head injuries can play tricks. Ethan sat up slightly, wincing. I know what I heard. The chief stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think anybody's going to believe a suspended firefighter over a department head? Be smart, Cole. Let it go. Ethan stared at him. You're hiding something. Hanlon's smile faded. He turned to Maya. And you should remind him what happens to people who chase ghosts. Then he left, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Ethan exhaled shakily. He was there, Maya, that night. I heard his voice over the channel. She sat beside him. He's covering something up. I found his name on the old report. He frowned. Why would he? Because someone deleted a minute from the radio log. The minute you were blamed for ignoring orders? Ethan's jaw tightened. He torched the evidence. And maybe more than that, she said quietly. If he started the fire, he shook his head. No, that doesn't make sense. She leaned closer. Then why warn me to stop digging? He looked up sharply. He contacted you. Her silence was answer enough. Ethan clenched his fists, the heart monitor picking up speed. You and Ellie need to get somewhere safe. She frowned. I'm not running. This isn't about pride, Maya. If he thinks you have proof, I do, she said, meeting his eyes. And I'm not giving it up. That night, back at home, Maya sat at her kitchen table, files spread around her. Old reports, maps, Ellie was asleep upstairs. The only sound was the rain against the window and the faint hum of the refrigerator. She traced the line of the ridge on the map with her finger, comparing it to this week's fire zone. The two fires started in the same place. Exactly the same. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown, last warning. Stop before the next fire finds you. She turned off the phone, heartbeats thundering. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out Ethan's old voice recorder, the one he used to carry on calls. Maybe, just maybe, it still held something. She pressed play, static, wind, then Cole, this is Hanlon. Repeat, do not engage. Leave the ridge, a burst of flame, a crash, then silence. She rewound it, hands trembling. The timestamp read, 1943, the missing minute at dawn. Maya stood outside the firehouse with the recorder clutched in her palm. Smoke drifted over the valley again. A controlled burn, they said. A safety measure. But to her, it smelled like a cover-up. She slipped the recorder into her pocket and whispered to herself, let's see how long the truth burns. The morning the truth almost burned away, the sky was unnaturally clear. The smell of pine and ozone hung in the air. But underneath it, something else. Gasoline buyer could feel it the moment she stepped into the Glenwood. Fire department headquarters. The whole building hummed with tension. The air too quiet for a place full of people who were supposed to save lives. She clutched her bag tight inside. Ethan's recorder and the printed logs she'd copied from the old station. The missing minute. The voice. The proof Hanlon was in his office. She could see him through the glass, broad shoulders, silver hair, the clean precision of a man used to control. She knocked once, then pushed the door open. Brooks, he said smoothly, you look like you've seen a ghost. She shut the door behind her. Maybe I have. He smiled without warmth. Something I can help you with. You lied, she said. About Slate Creek. About the radio logs. His face didn't move. You'll have to be more specific. She dropped the recorder onto his desk. Play it. Hanlon leaned back, hands folded. I don't take orders from medics. Then take this as a warning, she snapped. Because if I walk out of here alive, I'm going straight to the state board. That made him move. Slowly, deliberately, he pressed play. Cole, this is Hanlon. Repeat, do not engage. Leave the ridge. Then the sound of fire, a roar, a scream, a collapse. Hanlon's jaw flexed. Where did you get that? You covered it up, she said. You blamed Ethan to protect yourself. His eyes flicked up, sharp as glass. Careful, Maya. You ordered them back in, didn't you? You sent them into the canyon when you knew it was unstable. He stood, suddenly, towering over her. You think anyone's going to believe the word of an EMT over a decorated chief? You don't know what you're dealing with. She held his gaze. Yes, a coward. For a heartbeat, the room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock. Then Hanlon smiled, slow, cold. You really should have stayed out of this. She turned for the door. That's when she smelled it again, stronger now. Gasoline. Hanlon saw her realization too late. She looked down. Under the desk, a slow drip spread from a tipped canister. On the floor, a fuse line. Her blood ran cold. You wouldn't, she began. He struck the lighter. The explosion was deafening. The blast hurled her backward. Through glass, through light, into nothing but heat and sound. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Then training took over. Crawl low, stay below the smoke, find air. Flames tore through the office, licking up the walls. Sirens blared. Shouts filled the hallway. She staggered toward the exit, coughing, half blind. The bag with the recorder was gone, swallowed by fire. Someone grabbed her from behind, dragging her through the haze. She fought instinctively until she heard the voice. Maya. It's me. Ethan. He was still in a hospital t-shirt, oxygen mask hanging from his neck, eyes wild with panic. What the hell are you doing here? She gasped. Looking for you, he said. Then the whole damn building went up. She coughed hard, pulling at his arm. Hanlan, he's still inside. Ethan's jaw set. Then we get him out. He grabbed a fire blanket, threw it over her, and together they forced their way through the thick smoke. The hallway was collapsing, ceiling panels dropping like rain, glass cracking under the heat. They found Hanlan pinned under a beam, coughing, face black with soot. Help me, he rasped. Maya stared at him, torn between fury and instinct. Ethan didn't hesitate. He heaved the beam aside, grimacing through pain, and pulled the older man free. Move, Ethan shouted. Now. They made it to the rear exit just as the main stairwell gave out behind them. Fire consuming everything outside. Paramedics rushed to meet them. Maya collapsed on the asphalt, lungs screaming. Hanlan was alive, barely. His uniform burned, skin blistered. Ethan crouched beside Maya, gripping her hand. You okay? She nodded, coughing. The recorder, he shook his head. Forget it. You're alive. She looked back at the building. The flames reflected in her eyes, like a memory coming true again. No, she whispered. He'll bury it all again. The next day, the fire department smoldered in ruins. Investigators called it a gas leak accident. Hanlan was transferred to Denver General for recovery. No charges. No questions. Maya sat on the hood of Ethan's truck at dawn, wrapped in a blanket, watching the smoke curl into the pale sky. Ethan stood beside her, a fresh bandage across his temple. They're calling it an accident, she said bitterly. Let them, he said. We know the truth, but it's not enough. He looked at her. Then we start over. The truth's still in us, Maya. They can't burn that. She looked at him, at the man who kept walking through fire for her, and said quietly, You always run toward the flames. He smiled faintly. Only when something worth saving's inside. Behind them, the first morning light broke through the smoke, thin and gold, turning the ash to silver for the first time in years. Maya didn't flinch at the smell of burnt wood. It didn't smell like loss anymore. It smelled like survival. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Glenwood Firehouse explosion to survive. One under investigation, ex-captain Ethan Cole and Emet. Maya Brooks questioned in internal probe. Maya dropped the newspaper onto the counter. Her hands were still bandaged from the burns, her voice raw from smoke. The words blurred into one another, questioned, suspended, arson inquiry. They were turning it all against them. Ethan was at the window, staring at the rain. He hadn't said much since they left the site. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but sharp. They're framing us. Maya nodded. Hanlan's not done. He turned. You think he set the fire himself? She met his gaze. No, someone did it for him. That afternoon, she went to pick up Ellie from school. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with smoke and wet asphalt. Parents waited by cars. Kids laughed and splashed in puddles. Everything seemed normal to normal. But when the bell rang, Ellie didn't appear. Maya's chest tightened. She scanned the crowd. Then she saw a man, tall, wearing a fire department jacket, sunglasses even though the sun was gone. He was holding Ellie's hand. She froze. "Ellie," she shouted, breaking into a run. The man looked up startled, then pulled the girl toward a grey pickup truck parked near the corner. "Hey!" Maya screamed. "Let her go." The man shoved Ellie into the truck and jumped in after her. Tires screeched. Maya sprinted, banging on the hood as the truck peeled away, barely missing her by inches. Through the back window, she caught a glimpse of Ellie's terrified face and the fire department, insignia stitched onto the man's sleeve by the time Ethan arrived. She was shaking, breath ragged, hands smeared with mud. "They took her," she whispered. "Someone from the department. I saw the patch." Ethan's jaw locked. "Hanlon, I don't know. But we have to find her." He grabbed his keys. "We will." They drove toward the ridge, the same direction the truck had gone. Radio silence filled the cab, except for Maya's shallow breaths. "She's just a kid," she muttered. "Why her?" "Because she's you," Ethan said. "They can't touch you, but they can break you." Her hand tightened on the dashboard. "Then we make sure they don't." Night fell fast. By the time they reached the old Firebreak Road, the sky was bleeding orange again. Smoke coiled in the distance. A new fire. "This isn't possible," Ethan said, squinting at the glow. "The humidity's too high." "Unless someone lit it," Maya whispered. They parked at the edge of the forest, headlights off. The smell hit first, accelerant, diesel. "This wasn't an accident." "Stay here," Ethan said, grabbing his flashlight. Maya followed anyway. "You think I'm leaving you alone now?" He didn't argue. They found the grey pickup half a mile in, abandoned near the edge of the clearing. No sign of Ellie, but on the hood, a note taped under a magnet. "You want her back. Come, finish what you started. R.H. Ray Hanlon." Maya felt the air go out of her lungs. "He's insane." Ethan's face hardened. "He's desperate. The fire will cover everything. Then we stop it," she said. He turned to her, a small, broken smile crossing his face. "You sound like me." She met his eyes. "I learned from the best." They followed the sound of the fire, a low, endless roar echoing through the trees. The flames hadn't spread yet, but the wind was turning. Fast they reached a service cabin at the base of the ridge, an old training post the department had sealed off years ago. Light flickered through the windows. Inside, Ellie sat tied to a chair, eyes wide, and Hanlon stood beside her, calm, immaculate, a pistol in his hand. "Took you long enough," he said. "Let her go," Ethan growled. Hanlon tilted his head. "You think you're heroes, but heroes die in fire. It's what you're good at." He gestured around the cabin, gas cans stacked in every corner, a fuse line running to the door. "The department needed a scapegoat 5 years ago. You gave it to them. You'll do it again." Maya stepped forward. "You killed those men." "I saved the department," Hanlon snapped. "You think anyone funds a firehouse that admits negligence? That kind of scandal buries a town." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You buried them instead." Hanlon's eyes gleamed. "I'm cleaning up loose ends." "You two never learned when to walk away." He flicked the lighter open. Ethan moved first, lunging forward, slamming into Hanlon as the lighter fell. The gun went off, deafening in the small space. Maya ran to Ellie, cutting her ropes, pulling her close. "Mummy." Ellie sobbed. "I was scared." "It's okay, baby." "It's okay," she whispered, heart pounding. Ethan and Hanlon crashed into the wall, the gun skidding across the floor. Flames licked at the spilled fuel. The heat surged. The air thinned. "Go," Ethan shouted. "Get her out." Maya hesitated, torn. "Go." She grabbed Ellie, dragging her toward the door just as the first explosion hit. The roof groaned, splintering. She turned back. Ethan was still inside, fighting to hold Hanlon down as fire swept the walls. "Ethan," she screamed. He met her eyes through the smoke and smiled. "Run." She barely made it 10 yards before the cabin went up. The blast threw her and Ellie into the mud. Debris rained down. The world turned orange, then black. For a long moment, all she could hear was fire. Then faintly, a cough. "Ethan." She gasped, turning. He stumbled from the wreckage, limping, half covered in soot, dragging Hanlon by the collar. The older man was unconscious, barely breathing. Maya ran to help him, tears cutting lines through the ash on her face. He coughed, voice hoarse. "Told you I'm hard to kill." They laid Hanlon on the ground as fire engines approached in the distance, sirens slicing through the dawn. Ethan looked down at him. "You're done." Hanlon blinked weakly, lips curling into something like a smile. "You think this ends with me?" Then he went still. Maya shivered, clutching Ellie close as the fire roared behind them. Ethan put his arm round her shoulders, pulling her in. "It ends when we say it does." Hours later, the fire was out. The authorities arrived. Statements were taken. Evidence was bagged. The truth, the real truth, was finally out there, burned into every camera, flash, and headline. But as the sun broke over the ridge, Maya realized something. It wasn't just about clearing their names. It was about starting over, from the ashes up. The fires were finally out, but Glenwood still smelled like smoke. Not from the forest, from people's memories, from the whispering, the stares, the way neighbors paused when Maya walked by with Ellie, then smiled too quickly, pretending they weren't afraid of what she might say. Truth had a way of burning slow. Ethan was released from the hospital a week later, limping but alive. The department had suspended him indefinitely pending formal review. Formal review, that phrase everyone used when they wanted something to disappear quietly. He tried to laugh it off. "At least they're consistent," he said. Maya didn't laugh. She'd seen the same report he had. Deputy Chief Raymond Hanlon, deceased at scene. Case closed. Except she knew what Hanlon had said before the end. "You think this ends with me?" That morning, she stood outside the State Fire Commission building, a monolith of glass and concrete downtown, all sharp edges and cold reflections. Inside, a hearing was being held. The Glenwood incident and departmental accountability. Ethan adjusted his tie awkwardly. He hated suits. Maya brushed soot off his sleeve. It was symbolic somehow, even after everything. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. He looked at her. "Yes, I do. I owe them the truth. The ones who didn't make it." Her throat tightened. "Just be careful what you say. They want to make this go away." He nodded. "They'll try, but so will we." The hearing room was half courtroom, half theater. Reporters lined the back rows. Commissioners sat in a row like judges, their faces unreadable. When Ethan took the stand, The air shifted, quiet, tense, alive. He told them everything. Slate Creek, the deleted logs, Hanlon's threats, the final fire. At first, they let him talk. Then the questions started. Mr. Cole, you claim to have heard Deputy Chief Hanlon's voice. Do you have evidence of that? The recorder was destroyed in the explosion, so we only have your word. He clenched his fists. And hers, he said, nodding toward Maya. A murmur rippled through the room. The chairman leaned forward. Mr. Cole, you've been suspended twice for insubordination. Why should this board take your word over an officer of 20 years? Ethan stared him down. Because I walked through fire for this department while they stood behind paperwork. Afterwards, outside the courthouse, the cameras swarmed. Mr. Cole, did you falsify reports? Miss Brooks, were you involved in the Glenwood explosion? Are you two in a relationship? Maya grabbed Ethan's arm, pushing through the chaos. Keep walking. They made it to the truck. Inside, silence. The kind of silence that weighs. Finally, Ethan said, they don't want truth. They want a headline. She turned to him. Then we give them one. That night, she uploaded everything. Every scan, every report, every timestamp she'd copied before the station burned. She sent it to the Herald, to the state attorney's office. 2-3 independent fire investigators across the country. And then she wrote a letter, short, honest, raw. People think fire destroys everything. It doesn't. It reveals what's been hidden. If anyone in this department still remembers why they took the oath, it's time to act. She didn't sign it with her name. She signed it for Slate Creek, for the ones who never came home. By dawn, her inbox was full. Journalists, whistleblower protection attorneys, and one message that made her blood run cold. You don't know me, but Hanlon wasn't working alone. Check the supply logs from the East Warehouse. Attached. A single photo, a ledger page, dated the week of the first fire. One signature stood out. D. Mercer, the current fire marshal. Maya woke Ethan with a whisper. It's not over. He blinked groggily. What? She showed him the screen. Mercer. He was deputy chief before Hanlon. He handled all the supply routes, accelerant purchases, training burns, everything. Ethan sat up. You think he's the one? She nodded. Hanlon covered for him. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting the man above him. Ethan stared at the photo, jaw tightening. Then we bring him down. Later that day, the department released a statement, pending ongoing investigation. Captain Ethan Cole and EMT Maya Brooks remain under review for their role in recent events. No mention of Mercer. No mention of Hanlon. Just two names, the ones who survived. Maya threw the paper onto the table. They're rewriting it already. Ethan put a hand on hers. Then we make sure they can't. He stood, grim determination in his eyes. Tomorrow we go to the warehouse. She frowned. You just got cleared for light duty. He smirked faintly. Light duty's subjective. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley, low, distant, like the earth warning them. Maya watched the storm gathering over the ridge, the place where it had all begun. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what waited in the fire. She whispered to herself, ashes don't lie. The night smelled like metal and rain. The Glenwood East Supply Depot stood at the edge of the industrial park, a long row of warehouses, windows blacked out, lights dead. It looked abandoned, but Maya could feel it. The hum of generators somewhere inside, the faint glow of heat through the cracks of the steel doors. She glanced at Ethan. "You sure about this?" He nodded, tightening his gloves. "You saw the ledger. Mercer's been signing off on shipments that don't exist. Whatever he's hiding is in there." She pulled her hood lower. "And if he's waiting for us?" Then we stopped waiting back. They crept along the wall, keeping to the shadows. Wind carried the smell of fuel, faint but growing stronger. Ethan found a side door half open. "He's been here recently." Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows, stacks of crates, broken hoses, oxygen tanks, drums of accelerant-labeled training foam. But the labels were fake, too clean, too new. Maya knelt beside one, scraping at the paint. Underneath, she found the word methyl fuel. Her pulse jumped. He's been siphoning city fuel through training programs. That's how they funded it. Ethan looked around, jaw tightening. "And Hanlon covered the paperwork." She nodded, "until we showed up." They moved deeper in, past the empty pallets. A faint light flickered, a desk lamp. And sitting behind it, calm as if waiting for them all along, was Fire Marshal Daniel Mercer. He was older now, but sharp, his uniform crisp. His eyes the cold grey of steel. "I thought you too might come," he said. "You've made quite a mess." Ethan stepped forward. "Hanlon's dead because of you." Mercer didn't blink. Hanlon was weak. He panicked. "You should thank him. He tried to protect you." Maya's voice cut in, low and steady. "Protect us from what?" Mercer smiled faintly. "From the truth. The town needed heroes, not headlines. You think the world cares about a few burned men in a canyon? We built this department out of those ashes." "You've built it on lies," Ethan said. He shrugged. "Same thing in politics." Maya's phone buzzed, a soft vibration that echoed too loud in the silence. Mercer's eyes flicked to her pocket. "Who are you recording for this time?" "The press." She said nothing. He sighed, almost disappointed. "You could have been a great face for the department, Maya. The grieving medic, the survivor. But you just had to dig." He stood, reaching into his coat. Ethan's muscles tensed. "Don't." Mercer pulled out a detonator, small, black, red light blinking. "I learned from Hanlon's mistakes. No more loose ends." The first explosion hit the far wall, a deep thud, then the roar of fire swallowing air. Crates toppled. Flames rolled up the shelves. Maya grabbed Ethan's arm. "Back door," he shook his head. "It's blocked." "We go through the east aisle." They ran, ducking under falling beams, the air turning thick and metallic. The detonations came in waves, controlled, almost surgical. Mercer was walking behind them through the fire, calm pistol in one hand, detonator in the other. "You should have let the past die," he shouted. Ethan turned, grabbing a loose fire extinguisher, and hurled it. It exploded mid-air, knocking Mercer back. "Keep moving," he yelled. They reached the far end. The emergency exit chained shut. Maya ripped at it, coughing. "It's locked." Ethan yanked a crowbar from a crate, slamming it into the latch until the metal screamed. Behind them, Mercer rose through the smoke, gun leveled. "I warned you, Cole," he called out, voice echoing. "You're addicted to fire." Ethan turned, sweat and soot streaking his face. "No, I just don't run from it anymore." He charged. The shot rang out. Maya screamed his name. Ethan stumbled, hitting the wall. Blood bloomed dark against his shirt. Mercer advanced, gun still raised, until Maya swung the crowbar with everything she had. It connected with a sickening crack. Mercer fell, the detonator clattering away, landing in the spreading pool of fuel. The red light blinked twice, then everything went white. When Maya opened her eyes, she was outside, rain pouring, her ears ringing. The warehouse behind her was a pillar of fire, sirens wailing in the distance. She turned. Ethan lay a few feet away, motionless. She crawled to him, hands shaking, pressing against his wound. "Ethan, stay with me," she whispered. "Please, you don't get to leave again." He coughed weakly, eyes fluttering open. "You hit him." She let out a choked laugh. Hard. He tried to smile, but winced. "Good." She tore a strip from her jacket, pressing it to his side. "You're gonna be okay." He caught her wrist, his hand trembling but firm. "If I don't make it, don't," she snapped. "You will." He looked up at her, eyes soft despite the pain. "Then listen anyway. If there's ever a fire again," she leaned down, tears streaking through the soot, "we run together." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, together." By the time the fire crews arrived, Mercer was gone. No trace left but ashes and steel. They found Ethan barely conscious, Maya refusing to leave his side. When they asked what happened, she just said, "We finished it." Days later, headlines filled the news feeds. Fire Marshal Mercer under investigation. City funds unaccounted for. Cole and Brooks cleared of all charges. The world finally knew, but in the quiet after the storm, Maya didn't care about justice or headlines. She cared that Ethan was still breathing, that Ellie was asleep upstairs, that, somehow, the fire was out, inside and out. She walked to the porch, watching dawn paint the horizon gold. Ethan joined her, bandaged but smiling, a mug of coffee in hand. "Morning," he said. She leaned into him. "Smells like rain." He nodded. "No smoke." She smiled softly. "Not today." The storms had come early that spring. Soft rain swept through Glenwood for 3 straight days, washing soot off the streets, making the hills bloom green again, for the first time in years. The valley didn't smell like smoke. It smelled like something cleaner, like the world had finally exhaled. Ethan sat on the porch, his arm wrapped in a sling, a blanket over his legs. Maya leaned in the doorway, watching him fight with a stubborn thermoslid. "You're supposed to rest, not wrestle coffee," she said, smiling faintly. He looked up, grinning. "I'm just proving I'm still functional." "You nearly got yourself killed." "Again," she replied, walking over to sit beside him. Rain drummed on the tin roof above them, steady, calm. She handed him a cup. "Functional enough to hold this." He raised it in mock salute. "Barely." Inside, Ellie's laughter rang out as she built a castle out of couch pillows. Her drawings were taped all over the wall, fire trucks, stars, houses with tiny blue chimneys. One drawing stood out, though, a family of 3, standing in the rain, holding hands. Above them, written in crooked letters, "No more fire." Maya smiled softly when she saw it. "She's healing," she said. Ethan followed her gaze. "So are we." She turned to him, teasing gently, "You mean you're healing?" "I'm fine." He raised a brow. "You haven't slept through a night in weeks." "I'm a mum," she said simply. Sleep's optional. He chuckled, then went quiet. You ever think about leaving? Starting over somewhere else? She looked out at the rain. I used to, but then I realized. It wasn't Glenwood that was broken. It was us. The fire didn't ruin this town, it revealed it. He nodded slowly. Ashes don't lie. They sat in silence a while, listening to the rain. Then Ethan spoke again, softer. You ever think about what's next? She turned, brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean, he hesitated, awkward suddenly, which was rare for him. When my suspension's up, they offered me a new position. Training coordinator. No field work. Her eyes widened. You'd take it, he shrugged. Maybe it's safe, Maya smiled, eyes teasing. You, safe? I don't buy it. He laughed quietly, rubbing his neck. Yeah, me neither. She nudged him gently. But it's good. You'd teach the next generation how not to run into burning warehouses. He grinned. That's half the job. A moment passed. Then his tone shifted, serious, almost shy. Maya, she looked at him. What? He took a deep breath. We've been through everything, and I don't know how many times we've almost lost each other. So if I'm gonna say this, I'd rather do it while I can still talk. Her heartbeat quickened. Ethan. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a charred silver ring, edges warped from heat. I found it in the ashes, he said. Back at the warehouse. It's yours. She stared at it, frozen. It was the ring he'd given her 8 years ago, before everything fell apart. He smiled softly. Guess some things don't burn easy. Tears welled in her eyes. You kept it, he nodded. I kept hoping one day I'd get to try again. Not the way we were better. Real. She laughed through tears. You're proposing with a half-melted ring? He shrugged, smiling. It survived the fire. That's got to count for something. She took it, turning it over in her fingers, the metal still scarred but beautiful. Then she slipped it on. It fits, she whispered. He grinned. Told you. Meant to be. Inside, Ellie peeked through the door. Are you two done being weird? She asked, hands on her hips. Maya laughed, wiping her eyes. Come here, trouble. Ellie ran out into the rain, barefoot, spinning in circles. Look, she shouted. It's not scary anymore. Ethan stood, wincing a little, but smiling. You're right, kiddo. Not scary at all. He stepped off the porch, taking Maya's hand, and together they walked out into the drizzle. The rain fell around them like forgiveness, soft, endless, new. Later that night, the town held a memorial at the rebuilt station. A plaque stood in the center courtyard, in memory of those who ran into the fire. May their courage light what remains. Ethan ran his fingers over the engraving. Maya placed a single flower beneath it, wild sunflower, yellow against the dark marble. When she looked up, the sky was clearing. Through the last of the clouds, a single beam of moonlight cut across the valley, silver against the wet pavement. Ethan whispered, You smell that? She smiled. Rain, not smoke. He nodded. Finally. 5 years later. The sea was their soundtrack now. Waves crashed gently beyond the dunes, seagulls scattered across the Oregon sky, and the smell of salt replaced the ghost of smoke that used to cling to everything they owned. The Hales' cottage sat on a small bluff overlooking the ocean. White painted with blue shutters, always smelling faintly of coffee and sea breeze. The locals knew them simply as the family from Glenwood. No one here cared about what came before, only the way they laughed now, loud and often. Ethan's limp was still there, a small echo of the fire that once tried to take him. He spent his mornings at the Coastal Training Center, teaching new recruits how to move through flames without fear. He never told them everything, just enough. When someone asked about the scar on his ribs, he'd smile and say, "That's where the fire learned who was tougher." At night, he wrote, not reports, not witness statements, stories. A collection of memories turned lessons, titled The Ones Who Stayed. Each chapter began the same way. Fire doesn't take it tests. Maya ran the Harbor Light Medical Unit 2 streets down, a clinic she built from scratch. The sign out front read, Maya Brookschool, AMT Rep. Director, it was always open for emergencies, fishermen, kids with scraped knees, or exhausted firefighters who needed a hand and a quiet word. She was known for her calm, the kind that came from having already seen the worst. People often said, "You must hate fire." She always smiled softly and replied, "No. Fire gave me everything I love. It just took the long way." And Ellie 10 now was pure energy. She kept seashells in a jar, labeled "Not from the Fire." She painted the walls of her room with tiny stars and once told her teacher that her dad used to fight dragons made of smoke. Every Sunday morning, she dragged her parents to the lighthouse at the edge of town, where they'd sit and eat sandwiches while the wind howled one day. She asked, "Mum, what happens to the people who go into the fire and don't come back?" Maya thought for a moment, then said, "They stay where the light stays. That's why the sky glows at night. It's them, still working." Ellie nodded, satisfied. "So we don't forget them." "Never," Ethan said quietly. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from the State Department, a formal seal, crisp envelope. Ethan opened it on the porch, Maya watching from inside. He read silently, then smiled. "What is it?" she asked. He held it up. "They're reopening Slate Creek, turning the old fire zone into a memorial park. They want us there for the dedication." Maya hesitated. "You want to go back?" He looked out at the sea. "Yeah, I think it's time." A month later, they stood on the rebuilt ridge. Wildflowers had grown through the ash, and a plaque now marked the spot where everything had begun. Slate Creek Memorial Park. For the ones who ran toward the fire and those who waited for them to come home, Maya traced her fingers over the carved names. Ethan stood beside her, hand in hers. Ellie ran ahead, chasing butterflies through the meadow. It didn't smell like smoke anymore, just pine, grass, and wind. Maya whispered, "We made it back." Ethan smiled. "We always do." As the sun began to set, Ellie came running back, holding a single wildflower. "This one didn't burn," she said proudly. Maya crouched down, brushing dirt from the petals. "No, it didn't." Ethan took the flower gently from her and tucked it behind Maya's ear. She laughed, blushing slightly. "What are you doing?" He grinned, making sure the fire doesn't forget who beat it. That night, back at the cottage, the three of them sat by the fireplace. Not the kind that roars and devours, but the small, steady kind, warmth without fear. Outside, rain began to fall softly against the windows. Ellie yawned, curling up under her blanket. "I like the rain," she murmured. "It sounds like the ocean." Maya brushed her hair back. "It sounds like home." Ethan looked at them both, 2 miracles he'd nearly lost, 2 reasons he'd walked through every inferno. He whispered, almost to himself, "Sometimes the fire doesn't take you. It just leads you home." The rain kept falling, steady and endless. Inside, the light from the fireplace flickered gold, alive, refusing to fade. And even after they turned in for the night, the glow remained quiet, gentle, unburning, where the light stays.